Hello, my name is Kloniki Natalia Petru, and I am an economist at the Department of Planning and Regional Development at the University of Thessaly in Greece. I would like to welcome you to our ESSPIN open access online courses about inequality. To give you some background, ESSPIN is a research project funded by the European Commission Horizon program to study economic, social, and spatial inequalities in Europe. Our research lasted for 3 years, and it was the outcome of a collective effort of 13 universities and research organizations. It has now been concluded, and we would like to share with you some of our findings. We hope that you find this lecture useful, and today's topic will be about global income inequality and putting it in context. We will talk about both within and between countries income inequality. Of course, as all of us know, income inequality has been on the rise in recent years, and it has been at the forefront of research and policies agendas. For instance, two of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations refer to gender and economic inequality as both between and within countries as two of the most important aspects that need to be tackled. At the same time, at the European level, the European Pillar of Social Rights Action Plan mentions that equal opportunities need to be provided to everyone, and no one needs to be left behind. And all these need to be established by 2030, so in 5 years' time. Of course, income inequality is not just an economic issue. It has other aspects as well, social, political, institutional, affecting also gender equality and race equality. And of course, it has also further dimensions like health, quality of life, education. So it affects basically all aspects of life and all levels of society. To start with, we will see a slide here describing the current state of inequalities and their evolution. So in this figure from Piketty, we can see that in the past 2 centuries, namely from 1820 to 2020, there has been a shift in the between and within income inequality part at the global level. So in 1820, the most part of inequality was attributed to within countries income inequality, whereas in 2020, there is the most part of inequality is still attributed to within, but the share of between countries income inequality has decreased in the last 40 years. It represents now 32% of global inequality, whereas in 1980 it represented about 55% of the global inequality. This declining level of between countries income inequality in the past 40 years can be attributed to the rapid growth of emerging economies like China and India. And also researchers predict that there will be a decrease in global income inequality in general by 2030 because the younger generation in developing countries becomes more educated and demand changes within their countries. At the same time, it is essential here to distinguish between these two parts of inequality. We have created a graph here that takes into account the coefficient of variation between all countries. In blue, we can see the coefficient of variation, and in orange, the weighted coefficient of variation. We can see that, of course, levels are still quite high of between countries income inequality, despite the total decrease in terms of the global level. But we can see that from 1990 to 2022, the level of between countries inequalities has indeed been decreasing. As I said, this can be attributed to the growth of China and India, as people have moved out of the lower bottom of the income distribution and towards the middle class. At the same time, since 1950, a few newer countries have been added to the bloc, and this has also affected the between countries inequality levels. In this slide, in this further slide, we can see the evolution of between countries income inequality, counted again with the coefficient of variation. In the first graph, we can see the picture at the geographic region level. And on the other figure, we can see the income according to the income level of the countries. Both these classifications have been taken from the World Bank Atlas. And we can see that there are 7 regions worldwide and 4 income categories. The geographical regions with higher between countries income inequality in 2022, which is the last year that we used as a reference, are Middle Eastern and North African countries, as well as South Asian countries. And in terms of income groups, we can see that in the past 10 years, there has been a short decrease or between countries inequality among all income levels, apart from the high income one, which has been facing a slight increase in its level. So we can see that depending on the region and we study, we can see different evolution of between countries income inequality. And it is very interesting to see also the evolution together and see the massive differences. Like for instance, the low income category, the between countries inequality rose quite noticeably from 1990 to 2005 and then dropped since then. Furthermore, as I said, there is also the part of within countries income inequality that we need to account for. It is an important still part of inequality because around 70% of the population worldwide lives in countries where inequalities have increased. In the figures, we can see the top 1%, top 10%, and bottom 50% income share worldwide in 2022. And we can see here that with regard to the income levels, the top 10% holds about 50% of the total income in those areas. Whereas in the high income category, we can see that the top 10% holds about 40% of the total income. So there is a distinction here between the different income levels. With regards to the geographic regions, the top 10% of the population with the highest share is located in Latin America and Caribbean, in Sub-Saharan Africa, in the Middle East and North Africa, and followed that by North America. So we can see here also a difference in the levels between the different geographic areas. And of course, we need to keep this in mind when studying within countries' inequalities. As a further step, we have here depicted the evolution of the different income shares from 1980 to 2022, along with the evolution of the GDP growth. We can see here that in times of recession, the bottom 50% income share increased slightly, whereas the top 1% and top 10% income share has been dropped in times of recession. This was noticed especially in the 2008 financial crisis and during the COVID-19 period. So, of course, we want to see here that there is some relationship between GDP growth and the income share levels. And we will see that further along the slides as well with an econometric approach. Before going into that, though, it is essential to describe some of the main measurements of income inequality. There are different measures that can be used. The most common one is the Gini coefficient of variation, the Gini coefficient, which accounts for the income inequality levels within countries. It takes values from 0 to 1. with 0 implying complete equality, whereas 1 implies complete inequality. Gini has faced some criticism that it's very sensitive to changes in the middle class, and it should be, and some further indicators should be used. The tile index was created, which also shows the discrepancy between the distribution of income and the distribution of the population between groups. It takes values from 0 to infinity. And also a more recent measure is the Palma ratio, which captures both lower and upper ends of the income distribution. And we calculated by dividing the richest 10% income share by the poorest 50% income share. So here there's a different approach in accounting for both the lower end, the higher end of the distribution, the more rich people, and the lower 50%, 40%. To start with, we have created here some figures which show some graphs which show the evolution of Gini. At the global level, we can see here the green line, and at the income level and at the geographic level again. The biggest contributors to the increase are shown to be upper middle and high income countries in terms of income category, and in terms of geographic areas, East Asia and East Asian Pacific, Europe and Central Asia, and North America have been some of the highest contributors in the increase of Gini. Especially, we should notice that North America has had a very massive increase in its Gini levels from 2019 towards 2022. Gini has been quite high, depending on the region we study, of course. For instance, we can see that Latin America has a very much greater greater numbers in Gini than, for instance, Europe has. So it's essential to keep in mind also the geographic location that we are studying. As I said, the measures that I mentioned before tend to cover more the average income inequality. Therefore, as a first step here, we have created a new measure of inequality, the so-called rich to poor ratio, which basically represents the ratio of the relative share of income at the top and the bottom income groups. So we calculate it by dividing the top 1 or top 10% income group share by the bottom 50% income group share. In doing so, we want to capture extreme income inequality. So we want to capture the very, very rich and the bottom 50%. And on the graph below, we can see two different versions of the RTP. The one is the top 1 to bottom 50, and the other is the top 10 to bottom 50. What we can notice is that the RTP of 1% to bottom 50% has very slightly fluctuated in the last 42 years and is almost at the same level as it was in 1990. So we cannot see very impressive differences in its number. On the other hand, the RTP of the 10 to 50% income group shares has dropped about 12 points from 1980 to 2022, and it reached its lowest value in 2019. So we can see a different evolution between the 1% and 10% income group share, which of course affects this new measure that we created and its evolution. As a further depiction here, we have the evolution of GDP growth again, and along this, the evolution of RTP and Gini for the past 43 years from 1980 to 2022. We can see that RTP decreased quite a lot in 2008 when the financial crisis hit the world, and has been again on the rise since 2020, slightly dropping from in 2021 and 2022. Whereas we can see that the Gini value has not fluctuated massively in these past 43 years, ranging from 56, rising to about 58, and then again 57 worldwide So we cannot see a very, very impressive fluctuations of the Gini in this 43-year period. It's important to note that not a lot of research has been done in combining the levels of between and within country income inequality. In these two graphs, we can see the evolution of the coefficient of variations and its relationship to RTP and Gini. So the coefficient of variation accounts for the between countries income inequality, whereas RTP and Gini count the within country income inequality. We can see that changes in the coefficient of variation level are more significant than the changes in Gini and RTP, but the relationship appears to be monotonic and positive. So an increase in the coefficient of variation leads also to an increase of inequalities among countries. This is like a first indication that these two phenomena are related, and they should be taken into account in a holistic manner and accounted for together. In those regards, we have created a simple, as a first step, a simple econometric model aiming to establish if there is the strength and the direction of the relations between within and between countries income inequality. In this case, the dependent variable is the within regions income inequality, which is counted with Gini and RTP. And the independent variables include the between regions inequalities, which are counted with the coefficient of variation and the development gap. It should be noted here that the development gap is measured by the distance of each region from the top country in terms of GDP growth. In this analysis, we have divided our countries into the 7 geographic regions that described before, in order to be able to draw this comparison between and within countries' income inequality. As we can notice in this table, we have created 4 different models for each case for the RTP and Gini variables. We can notice here that in the simple models, namely Model 1 and Model 5, as well as in the more fully developed ones like Model 4 and Model 8, there is a positive and significant impact of the coefficient of variation on both RTP and Gini. This indicates that higher inequalities between regions in terms of GDP per capita tend to increase also the inequalities within the global regions. At the same time, the development gap that is depicted in figures in models 2, 3, and 4 shows that there is a positive impact of the development gap on RTP, but for Gini, this is not significant. We can also, there's a positive, a significant impact for the development gap on RTP. At the same time, we should notice that there is an U-shaped impact in Model 4, whereas at first the development gap decreases RTP, and then it increases after some point. This indicates that as the distance from the top performing countries increases, so the gap increases, income inequality within regions initially may decline, but after a threshold, which has been defined at the RTP model at 75.3 and at the Gini model at 95, there is, after that threshold level, it increases its impact on, the gap increases RTP and Gini again. Just to get like an idea of what these numbers represent, the 75.3 threshold for the development gap here covers about 17% of the countries examined, whereas the 95 threshold gap for Gini covers about 14% of the examined countries. So still, it's quite a few countries that are affected in those regards from the evolution of the development gap and its effect on RTP and Gini. To get a better picture of which countries are involved, we have created two maps showing the countries that are above the threshold level at the RTP models and the Gini models. We can see that most countries are located in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. All the countries that are below the threshold will face a trade-off between internal and external convergence. But these countries that are above the threshold level need to find a balance between external opportunities and threats from their internal inequalities. So they need to find a balance to both close their development gap, but also tackle the internal inequalities that might be created in doing so. So in terms of policy implications with regards to this part of the research, the analysis has shown that high rates of growth tend to contribute to higher levels of income inequality. So inequality is an endogenous and persistent characteristics of the global and industrialized models of today's society. We have also proven that inequalities between countries affect in a positive manner inequalities within countries. And this co-movement is not monotonic, suggesting that countries with lower external gaps may need to converge further to the advanced top ones at the expense of greater within internal income inequalities. And also this trade-off that we explained can also explain why the distance covered in the last 33 years is not very impressive. So we highlight here that there is a need to approach between and within countries' income inequality in a holistic manner and try to close both ends together. But considering all these points, is inequality always a bad thing? To be honest, the answer is no. Some level of inequality is still needed in our societies in order for people to have incentive to work, be creative, get more innovative. So if inequalities are the result of unequal effort, they have a positive impact in the economy, promoting growth and promoting more innovation. At the same time, inequality is a bad thing when it arises from unequal opportunities among people. This means that people do not have the opportunity to get educated, to have access to affordable healthcare services. And this also has, of course, negative impacts on their financial capital and investment opportunities. So we want to highlight here that generally there is a part of inequality that stimulates growth, and above a certain turning point, which varies, of course, in its case, we will see that in a bit, there is growth damaging economic inequality. So we need to make a distinction whether inequality comes from unequal effort or unequal opportunity. So it's important to make this distinction here. As far as our approach is concerned, we have created here a further expanded empirical model in order to measure the impact of inequality on growth. So here the basic hypothesis is that income inequality, which is measured by Gini, is associated in a non-linear manner with economic performance. We have used 159 countries for the years 1990 to 2022, and covering 96% of the world's population. So still quite a big amount of countries is taken into account. It is a conditional convergent function. We want to test whether the level of development is associated with higher or lower growth performance. And of course, we take also various control variables into consideration. We use three different approaches in doing so. We use, first of all, a Driscoll-Gray standard generalized least squares model in order to get unbiased results. We also perform the same analysis using a three-stage least square approach. This helps us deal with issues of indigeneity and get more robust estimations. Here we make the assumption that the political stability factor that we take into account is an endogenous variable and is affected by the level of inequality as well. And we use finally a third estimation method, namely the weighted least squares model with Driscoll Gray standard errors, in order to see if significant differences in the population size of the countries make a difference in our results. So to start with, we have here our tables for the three approaches that we used: the single equation model, the three SLS model, and the population weighted model. And we can see that the growth and there's a quadratic relation which is robust across all models between the level of inequality and its impact on growth. So we can see that at first, some level of inequality has a positive impact on growth, whereas after a certain threshold, this becomes a negative. This impact becomes this negative. So of course, depending on each model and the different variables that we use in each one, the threshold level, we can see that slightly decreases in fuller models. So those models with a fuller set of variables have a higher explanatory power and generally produce lower turning points. We can see, for instance, that in the population-weighted models, where we used basically the same variables, but just accounted for the population in those countries, the threshold levels are relatively lower than in the single equation models. So again, here we have created a map showing the countries that are above the threshold, the lowest threshold turning point that we found, which is 57.1. And so those countries, which are basically located in the global south, with the exception of the USA, have a Gini value for at least 1 year that is above this estimated turning point. Countries with gray color are the ones that are below the threshold level for the entire period studied. We can see that for countries with levels of income inequality below the critical threshold, the current mix of taxation and redistribution seems to be effective in terms of growth performance, so no further action should be needed in these cases. But inequality is for countries above the critical threshold. It seems that the policy mix they use is not sufficient and creates serious social and economic growth problems. So for these countries, it is essential to strengthen both pre-market, in-market, and post-market policies in order to reduce inequality and at the same time improve growth performance. And to examine how between and within countries inequalities may interact, we have created a further 3D demonstration in the following slide, which basically shows the estimated impact of inequality on growth in surface A, the impact of development on growth in surface B, and the relationship between inequality and development level in surface C. Here again, we have used the threshold level of 57.1, which is the lowest threshold level we have obtained, and the development level at GDP per capita of 39,000 USD. And we have defined in those regards four quantiles that are associated with different combination of inequality and level of development and different effects, of course, on growth. To get a better picture, and because it's more interesting to see actually this 3D demonstration while I'm describing it. So we can see here in quantile 1, we have countries that we see have low levels of inequality and low levels of development. So low levels of inequality in those sense stimulate growth and help countries in this quantile converge faster to upper levels of development. We can see here that about 35% of our observations are in this category. So these countries will need to use update their policy mix and convert to higher levels of development. With regards to the quantile 2, here we have only 8% of our observations, and here we have, again, low levels of inequality, but higher levels of development. And in this case, the level of inequality below the threshold helps countries support their divergence trends from a great majority of other countries. So here again, it's a different, it's a similar picture with the countries here, but here we experience also higher growth level, higher development levels. Quantile 3 only has a very, very small share of observations, namely 1%. And here we have the case of very extreme income inequalities and at the same time high levels of growth and development. In this case, at some point, growth will eventually slow down. And this will also slow down the between countries income inequality for this small group. This is the case for only a small number of wealthy, very wealthy countries, and which have a huge gap between the rich and the poor. So finally, the most observations are noticed in quantile 4, which includes about 56% of the observations and combines lower levels of development and higher levels of inequality. In this case, extreme inequality will slow down growth, and as a result, it will negatively affect also prospects of convergence of these countries to mid-high levels of development. So this 3D demonstration basically wants to show us that at different development levels and different inequality levels will affect the prospects on growth. And for each country that is located in these different quantiles, it is essential to understand where they are located and which policy mix they should use in order to close their inequality gap and at the same time increase their growth. So our evidence has suggested that there is a robust process of convergence of low and mid-low income countries taking place during the last 3 decades, driven mostly, as I said before, by the emerging economies in Asia. However, at some point, after some critical mid-upper level of development, this process is halted, and the more advanced countries experience stronger growth and turn to diverge from this trend. Our results also highlight that income inequality has a robust inverse U-shaped impact on growth, indicating that up to a level, income inequality stimulates growth, but after a certain point, there is this impact has a negative, inequality has a negative impact on growth. And this nonlinear relation is statistically significant and robust across all models. Our findings have significant implications as they provide merely an economic way to draw a line that differentiates between growth-generating income diversity and growth-damaging income inequality, solely based on economic grounds, not on ethical or social grounds. So it's a good starting point to think about what stimulates growth and how inequality in each case should be handled. I hope you found this lecture useful, aiming to combine between and within countries' income inequality worldwide. Of course, this is an ongoing process, and it would be interesting to further develop our models with more variables or to get to examine them at the different years and cover more years to come. Also to capture better the effects of the COVID-19 crisis that have taken place in the last 5 years. So I thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions, of course, you're welcome to contact us at any point. Thank you so much.